Rock, 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 rock!
Stay tuned for more rock and roll.
All right. Welcome back to the It's Only Rock and Roll podcast. As always, I'm your host, Don 𝗵𝗃𝗲𝗏, episode 51, and the first show of 2024. Hope you all had a great holiday season out there. Myself, I spent the holidays as usual with vagrants at the bus station, sharing room temperature eggnog and singing show tunes until chased off into the wintry night by state troopers. I know, what can I say? I'm a sucker for tradition. Today's guest has been responsible for keeping the blues and roots rock and roll current and in the mainstream for several decades now. As a founding member and guitarist for the Fabulous Thunderbirds, he helped open the doors to like-minded artists, most notably his baby brother Stevie Ray, and thus exposed the MTV generation to true rhythm and blues and roadhouse rock and roll with singles like Wrap It Up and their 1986 top 10 hit, Tough Enough. He now enjoys a successful solo career and recently was the subject of the documentary Brothers in Blues, which chronicles his and Stevie Ray Vaughan's meteoric path to stardom. Please welcome to the It's Only Rock and Roll podcast, one of my musical heroes, Jimmie Vaughan. Hello, Jimmy.
How you doing?
Oh, doing great, man. Thank you for doing this.
All right. It's my pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Happy New Year. Thank you for being our first guest of 2024. Yeah.
When did we do this before?
We've never done this before.
Oh, I thought we had. Like years ago.
No. But I do want to start off by asking how you're feeling. I know you went through a bit of a health scare recently.
No, I'm feeling great. I did several shows earlier this year, and everything's going good. Feeling great.
How did that manifest itself? I mean, were you on stage or was it at home? What happened?
Yeah, I was at home. And I got up and I felt weird and I couldn't sleep and I had heartburn. So they took me to the doctor, took me to the hospital, and they called the doctor, and there you go.
And here you are.
And here I am. So I had a quadruple bypass.
Quadruple? Now, that must have scared the shit out of you when you first heard that, huh?
Well, it sounds scary, but I had a great doctors, and I feel better than ever.
Maybe a stupid question, but did the experience change the way you look at your career?
Well, no, I'm going to be 73. So once you get 70, you start thinking about all kinds of stuff. So I don't know, but I still play guitar every day, and that's what I like to do. I'm a very blessed guy, and I have a great family, and I have twins and older kids, and everything is great.
Are they taken after Dad in terms of music?
Well, one of them plays guitar. Actually, two of them play guitar, and one of my twins is a guitarist, and they enjoy music a lot, and they play piano. They've taken piano for several years, and they sing. So they're very musical.
I'm a firm believer that runs in the family on some level that we don't totally understand.
Yeah, maybe we don't understand.
Were your parents musical?
Well, my mother liked music, and my father played the piano, but he never told me, or I never heard him play. So I think he was a wannabe piano player. And I think some of his relatives or cousins used to play in, one of them played in 𝗀𝗲𝗃𝗃.
Tommy Dorsey?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Really? Oh. What did he play?
I don't even know.
Well, I want to go back to the beginning a little bit when you were a kid. I'm always interested in how big an influence radio was on musicians. And I mean, you had that great border radio being down there in Texas. Talk about how that inspired you.
Well, there was a show that came on at 10 o'clock after the news, or 10:30. It was on WRR, and it was called Cat's Caravan. And it was on till midnight. And then I had a transistor radio, so you can click it on and hide it under your pillow when you're supposed to be asleep. And, you can hear it in your bed. So I used to listen to 𝗀𝗃𝗃 Caravan till 12:30 or whenever it was. And then I would switch over to WLAC or XCRF they had the Wolfman Border Radio. XCRF was the Mexican station.
Yep.
And then I would go to Nashville. I can't remember the name of it, but it was famous. The Horseman.
Oh, yeah.
And all that. So all that stuff came in pretty clear in Dallas. So
you're getting all that influence. You're hearing the Tex-Mex stuff. You're hearing blues. You're hearing whatever was on the top 40, I imagine.
Yeah. Once you get into it and you like it, you search it out. And I loved all the blues, and it was still going on when I was a kid, Like I remember in my first band, the drummer's big sister came over and she hired us. We were like 12, 13. And she came over and hired us for her sorority party. And she said, I'll hire you if you learn this new song on the radio. And it was Scratch My Back, Slim Harpo.
Yeah.
So...
which, of course, you guys covered years later.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's great. That was contemporary then.
Absolutely.
Do you have like a clear memory of the first time you heard rock and roll?
I had to be, I watched Elvis on Ed Sullivan. I sat there with all my mothers and daddies and uncles and everything at a family gathering and sat in front of the TV and watched Elvis. And my uncles played guitar. They liked, Merle Travis and Western Swing.
Right.
And those kind of things. And then my dad's side had a couple of uncles that played in bands. So it was just everywhere. It was all around.
Did I hear that your parents were kind of friends with members of Bob Wills and Texas Playboys?
Well, I think my dad knew a couple of them, and one New Year's Eve they stopped by, or some of them stopped by the house, and they had a few drinks or something, I don't know.
That's pretty cool. I know you've told this story a million times about how you got introduced to playing the guitar, but it definitely bears repeating if you don't mind.
Well, a friend of mine, a guy that lived down the street, he said, if you want to be popular with the girls, you're going to have to play football. And I was like, oh, no, that's terrible. So anyway, he said tryouts or next week. I had just really played, by throwing the football around with kids at church or something, but I wasn't really a football player. So anyway, the kids, they said, okay, tryout is on Monday or Tuesday or something. So we went down there, and you know how that is. It's like the guys that are really football players they're already in the team, but you're kind of standing over here with the guys who are not really football players.
Right. Yeah.
And so the coach says, okay, let's see what you can do. I'm going to throw you a pass. So the coach threw me a pass. I mysteriously caught it. And so I'm running, and they piled on me, all the football players, and I broke my collarbone.
Oh.
So it's not a very good football story. But I went home, and my dad had to come home from work and let me in to the house. And he said, I just want you to stay out of trouble. I don't know what we're going to do with you. Just play your guitar, I guess. Because I had just gotten a guitar from a friend of his, and it had like 3 strings on it.
Yeah.
It was like an acoustic.
Right.
So he said, just play the guitar and keep out of trouble. And so I've actually been playing ever since.
Isn't it something?
But I think the trauma of the broken bone, the collarbone, and being at home, which I was happy about on one level.
Yeah.
I've been playing guitar ever since. So
Well, it just blows my mind. If you hadn't gone to that practice, the whole world would have been deprived of so much great music.
Oh, well, thank you.
How were you at school?
Oh, I was really good through about the 4th or 5th grade. I made like straight A's.
Yeah.
And then I got to where I didn't like it anymore, and I was interested in other things. And so I eventually quit, like in the 9th grade.
Right.
Ran off and became a guitar player. So, which I don't recommend for all you other kids out there.
Being in Dallas, I would imagine a lot of the big acts came through to town. Did you catch a lot of concerts when you were young?
Yeah. Well, I saw the Yardbirds a couple of times. I saw Hendrix, and that was when Hendrix did the tour, and he had Soft Machine opening. Mm-hmm. And, I saw a lot of local acts. There was a band around Dallas called the Nightcaps, and it was my first album that I ever bought was Wine, Wine, Wine by the Nightcaps.
Yep.
And so I actually learned how to play off of that record. I learned how to play bass, rhythm guitar, and lead guitar, and actually a little bit of drums. So,
yeah, I heard you say that in another interview, and I actually sought out that album. I was able to get a copy. It's great.
It's a great record.
Yeah.
Still sounds good.
Yeah. You talked about Hendrix. I know one of the first bands you worked with that was kind of took off a little bit in your area was the Chessmen.
Right.
And you guys actually ended up playing with Hendrix.
Yeah, the Chessmen, they were 21, and they had made local 45s and everything. And then they got me in the band. One of their guitar players drowned in a boating accident. And so the guitar player, Johnny Peoples, came, and he knew me, and I knew all the stuff. And so he said, why don't you join up? We've got a lot of gigs coming up here. So that was my first paying gig, really.
Big age gap there. I mean, my God, 14 to 21?
Yeah, there's, if you look at it like that, but I was pretty good when I was a teenager. So,
oh, I'm sure.
So,
yeah.
It all made sense if you'd have been there.
For example, getting into clubs, was that an issue at all, being underage?
Well, at first, when I was in my first band, my dad got us a gig 6 nights a week in the summertime at a club called the 𝗷𝗄𝗏 Lounge. So we had been playing a lot of gigs, but just not professionally. I guess if you make money, you're professionally.
Right.
So when I got in the Chessmen, I was making $300 or $400 a week in the 60s.
It's good money.
That was pretty good money.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's been fun, but I was just playing guitar. That's all I was doing, having fun.
And you made a decision to, like you said, quit school, and you left home. Was that like a split decision, or was that something that you were kind of thinking about for a while and then finally did?
Well,
did you have a plan, or was it just like...
No, I had no plan. I had a gig. I got in that band, and they had apartments and cars and girlfriends and Super Beetle amps, and they had charge accounts at the music store, and so it was wild.
Were your parents upset? They must have been.
Yeah, they were upset, and I just split. I told them that they were asking me to play, and they were like, well, what about school? And so I just ran off.
Yeah.
And
meanwhile, there's a little brother involved, little Stevie Ray.
Well, yeah, I ran off, and I left him my Telecaster. And my parents were worried that he would do the same thing, so they clamped down on him. And I think that made him even try harder.
Sure.
You got to understand that, I mean, we could play and we had gigs, so it was fabulous.
Yeah, it wasn't like a big gamble because you knew there was something there.
It was tough on my parents.
Yeah. And
I would hate it if my kids did something like that to me. But, things are different, so
sure.
I don't know.
This brings up an interesting thing now. I mean, obviously, there's a lot written and said about the way Stevie looked up to you as little brothers do. And he was driven with the passion that comes from, healthy sibling rivalry, I would imagine.
Yeah. He watched me learn how to play and then take off. And I left him a guitar, so he could always play. So he just had to go to school and work on his guitar playing until his time, you know.
Do you have a memory after you left home and your career was taken off? Do you have a clear memory of that first time when you heard Stevie play where you said to yourself, shit, he's done it. He's nailed it?
Well, after he got out of high school, he moved down to Austin where I was living. And he came and stayed with me for a little bit. And, he got a gig. And I remember going over there and seeing him play, And then after a couple of months, he really took off, guitar playing wise.
Right.
There's a little difference about play. You can play pretty good at your house, but once you get on stage with a band, it really comes out. You have to really do it.
Right.
So,
and I think the coolest thing about the dynamics of the Vaughan brothers is that you have both guitarists who approach it differently, a lot differently. I mean, with you, I hear a lot of T-Bone Walker in you playing, and him, you hear, Albert Collins, a bit of Hendrix in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what happened was, now it's useless to me to compare our two playing together. When you first start playing, you try to play everything that you can, and then you sort of, I don't know how to explain it, but when you first learn how to play fast, you have to learn how to play fast just to be able to play fast once in a while, okay?
Right.
Like, I knew this guy before I ran away from home who was named Julian, and he played on a Telecaster, and he was the fastest guitar player that I'd ever seen in Dallas. He was blistering fast. So I would just try to play fast a little bit, and I would play the guitar and then put it down, and then he would pick it up. So I don't know how you explain all the styles and everything.
Right.
But playing fast is just a phase, right? It's a phase. You have to learn how to do that. But you don't necessarily want to do that if you're trying to make a statement. If you're trying to write a paragraph, you have to have phrasing. And when you listen to your favorite musicians, usually they have phrasing. It's like they're talking to you.
Right.
Yeah, and so you have to learn that, and you have to play a bunch of crap in between.
Of course.
It's part of the learning process. So anyway, I don't know. It's ridiculous. Stevie was a fabulous guitar player, and he loved to play the guitar, and it shows.
And
so
you know how that is. I mean, this is the music industry. They always like to compare people. They try to compare Clapton with Hendrix.
Sure.
The fact that you're related, forget it. It's the laziest comparison in the world, right? But you can't, because they're two different people. They're
Sure.
two different approaches. But
Right.
You're talking about phrasing. There's another word that comes to mind when I hear you're playing, especially, and that's tone.
Uh-huh.
You got a great tone, and not all of it, some of it comes from the gear. I remember, and one of my guitarists that was in one of my bands gave me an earful once about the gauge of strings that Stevie Ray would use. So how much does gear play a role in what you do and the sound you get?
Well, Stevie used big strings, and for a while there, I used big strings too, experimenting, but also he would tune to E flat.
Right.
So there's a lot of tension lost,
Right.
But, that was like a feather in his cap. Like, people went crazy. Oh, he's doing all this stuff, and he's using bigger strings, and you know what I mean? It was all, the story.
Right.
But I mean, if you tune to E flat, you're losing a lot of tension.
Right.
So he had big strings, and he would tune to E flat, and it made for a beautiful tone.
Right.
And
now, what about you? What kind of amps do you?
well, I've had all kinds of different amps. I used to have matchless, and I would look for different stuff all the time. But I use Bassmans now. I've used Bassmans for several years, and that's the original amp.
Oh, yeah.
The Fender Bassman, I mean, we can argue and say that there was an amp before that, a Fender. But they Marshall, every amp company really copied the Bassman, I think.
Like that tone that you get on Full-Time Lover is just amazing. I mean, it's just so fat and round. It's just beautiful. Beautiful.
Well, thank you.
And you're not big on effects, I noticed. Well, on Once Too Many, you use like the Leslie.
Yeah, I used to have a Leslie with a Fender Leslie cabinet. I did that on Once Too Many and 100's Not Enough.
Great song.
And a few other ones.
Yep.
But they have tremolo gadgets that do the same thing now. You know. I have 2 Bassmans and a reverb, a unit that has tremolo and reverb. It's got 3 or 4 different ones. It works just great.
Sure. Well, we mentioned the T-Birds. How did you hook up with Kim Wilson initially?
Well, I was playing at a place on Sundays called Alexander's. It's in South Austin. It's not there anymore. I used to play out there every Sunday with my band. It was 𝗀𝗚 Cowdery and Keith Ferguson, and we had several different drummers. And one time, Kim Wilson came. He heard about us from this lady that we knew named Shirley. And so Shirley brought him out there to jam, and he sat in with us. And he pretty much stole the show on the harmonica. The other guy that I had was really good. He was great. But Kim, you know how he can take over when you see him on stage.
Oh, yeah.
So he pulled out his chromatic and he did all the tricks. And I just happened to know all the tricks too. So anyway, we hit it off, and later on we got a band together. And we said, well, okay, what are we going to call it? And I said, how about the Fabulous Thunderbirds? Because you can be Thunderbirds, but you have to be fabulous, right?
Right, exactly.
So that's when we started, later that year.
What are we talking, 74, 75, around there?
Yeah, I can't even, something like that, yeah. So anyway, we had a great run. We made a lot of records, and we had a fabulous time.
Clearly.
So Kim still plays great, and he's still all over the place.
Well, one of the things that's interesting to me, it may not be interesting to anybody around the country, but I'm from Rhode Island. I live in Cranston. Me and you know a lot of the same people, I think. Doug James was on your records.
Oh, yeah. Many records.
That's right. And he played with us on an album. Great connection there between Austin and Providence. They make a quick mention of it in the documentary that the T-Birds played mostly in your own area and, interestingly enough, Providence, Rhode Island. What was that connection?
Well, what happened was we went up to Boston, and we got a gig at, what was the name of that place in Cambridge?
I know what you mean. I'm drawing.
Well, we played Bunratty's, and we played around the Boston area.
Yep.
We got a gig at that one place, and that's where we met the Roomful.
Yep.
And so we met the Roomful. They were on the show, and somebody had the brains to put us together, the Roomful and the T-Birds. So, after we heard them, they were fantastic. And, if we didn't do it, they did it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So we ended up making records with their horns, and we did all kinds of stuff. So they were fantastic and fabulous. And, of course, Duke.
I started in 1990, so we kind of missed the boat when it came to seeing you guys all the time. You were national stars by then. But I'd heard all the stories. Oh, yeah, Stevie Ray used to come in. Jimmy and Kim would come in,
That was a great time.
We missed it.
What was the place that we played in Providence?
There was Lupo's.
Yeah, Lupo's.
Yep.
Yeah, we would play at Lupo's with the Roomful, and we would just tear it up.
I bet.
We would have so much fun.
Did you ever play the Last Call Saloon?
I think so.
There were always great rooms back then.
Yeah.
And this kind of leads to the next thing. Anyone under 40 may not understand or believe this, right? But there's always been that kind of insipid, lousy pop music scene that oversaturates the radio and all that. But right in the middle of that were you guys and Stevie Ray and George Thorogood, 𝗀𝗏𝗃𝗧𝗃 on mainstream radio, something that would be unheard of today. I remember MTV played all your videos. You guys did the Mardi Gras special in '87. I mean, what a magic time. Is that?
Well, I think that Kim and I, with the record company and with the T-Birds, we just wouldn't go away. So finally, the guys at Epic and CBS and all that, Tony Martell.
Yep.
Tony Martell said, you guys are great and we're going to sign you. And we're like, yeah, right. We didn't believe it. So he brought us in his office and signed us up. And it was incredible, you know.
Think that'll ever happen again?
Oh, I don't know. I don't want to say it won't, but
yeah.
But you know, I think the reason we made great music and everything was because we were having fun and we really loved what we were doing.
Right.
And the T-Birds, you know, we were riding around in a van. I remember one time we'd done a East Coast jaunt, and we got down to Washington, D.C., and we were having to go to Chicago or somewhere. And we got on one of those roundabouts.
Yep.
You know, they don't really have those in Texas.
Right.
Maybe they do now, you know. But,
yeah.
But back then, we would just drove it around and drove around and drove around like 10 times. And we pulled over and the guy said, you have to take the exit. So we said, which way's Texas? And he pointed and he said, okay, go that way. But we had a lot of great times.
Yeah.
It took a while to realize that I didn't have to drink, you know.
Right.
It was a lot of drinking going on back then and everything else. So,
especially then.
Yeah.
The first time you ever stepped on a stage sober had to be scary.
Yeah, well, I didn't really. I mean, there was a few times when I tried to play drunk, but I would usually do my drinking afterwards.
Smart. You don't want to be sloppy on stage by any means.
I don't know if it was smart, but...
Well, you know, all right, yeah. Why'd you leave the T-Birds?
Well, I didn't plan on leaving the T-Birds. What happened was I got Tony Martell at Epic Records said Stevie was hitting big, and we had just had Tough Enough, and we were still going on that, and Tony Martell at Epic Records and some other guys over there wanted Stevie and I to do a record together. And we had been talking about that since I was a little kid, you know, like
Sure.
My dad would, you know, whenever someone would come over, like a friend of his, he would say, go in there and get your guitar and show my friend what you can do. And Stevie would grab his guitar and we'd both play.
Right.
And then, you know, the guest would say, well, that's pretty good, kids. Maybe one of these days you can make a record together, you know.
Yeah, right.
So when we did Family Style, that was when it came together. And then before the record came out, Stevie got killed. It was before cell phones hit the market. Mm-hmm. And Stevie was opening for Eric Clapton. And Stevie called me and said, hey, you got to come up here. We're going to be on the show with Eric. And he wants you to come, and everybody's going to come, and we'll have a good time. So I flew up there and met him. You know, it was before cell phones. So Stevie said, I got to go home back to Chicago. We were taking helicopters from Chicago to Alpine Valley. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's what pretty much everybody did unless you were on the bus. So he had to go home and call his girlfriend. And so he got in a helicopter and they crashed. So that's how it happened.
You mentioned that, you know, you didn't know at the time when it happened. The gig was still going on and you just went to the hotel. Yeah.
See, we all flew over there together. And the there was a helicopter going to go early back to the hotel. The gig was over.
Right.
So he took the first helicopter trying to get back early. Like if there's 2 or 3 helicopters and there's a lot of people, so you can't get that many people in a helicopter. So there were several trips.
Yeah, yeah.
And he took off with a bunch of agents, Eric's agents.
Right.
And they crashed right into the mountain. And we didn't even know, like the helicopters knew, the pilots knew, but we didn't know.
How'd you find out?
Well, I found out the next morning. When I was flying home, we flew over O'Hare. I asked the pilot, I said, see if the other helicopter flew by here, not knowing. And so when I got home to the hotel in Chicago, they called me early in the morning and told me.
Just horrible.
Yeah. It was actually unimaginable.
Yeah.
That it could happen,
I know.
And that's the way it felt for years. And I'm still, kind of in denial, if you know what I mean.
I do.
I mean, feeling-wise.
I do, yes.
I know it's true, but I don't want to believe it.
Sure.
Right.
I don't want to linger on what happened, but were people held responsible?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was just, planes go down. I don't know that, I don't really want to say.
Yeah, I understand.
Let's talk about music.
Absolutely. When Family Style came out, were you going to tour it?
Sure, yeah, we were going to tour. I mean, I remember the record came out really good, and we were all there when we mixed it, and it sounded fabulous, and the guys from Epic Records came over. They were all excited, and they said, this is going to be a smash, and a lot of times when you turn a record in, they don't say that. They go, oh, shit.
Yeah.
What are we going to do with this?
Where's the single? I don't hit the single. Yeah, well, that crap.
Yeah. I don't hear a single.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And so, but it was, to our surprise, it was different this time, and they were all very excited. And then, before it came out, Stevie got killed. So I forgot where I was going.
Had he not, there was going to be a tour.
Yeah, we were going to have a tour, and we just hadn't really talked about it. We were kind of arguing over, well, what band do we use? Because both bands, the T-Birds and Stevie's band, were kind of wondering who was going to play,
Right.
on the tour, and the answer was none of them. Yeah, well, that was what we were thinking.
Yeah.
We were just talking about it. That's all.
Right.
We hadn't decided anything, and then the unimaginable thing happened. So
Right. Now, over the years, you've been in a couple of movies, which is interesting. People may not right away remember that. You were in Great Balls of Fire. You played, I forget the guy's name now.
Jans.
Right.
Yeah, the guitar player for Jerry Lee.
Right.
So
That's a little different, huh?
yeah, well, it was an opportunity, and we were hanging. We used to record in Memphis. That was all going on in Memphis. And Dennis Quaid, he was Jerry Lee. He got us in. I think him and the producers picked who would be the actors. They didn't want actors. They wanted musicians who wanted to be actors.
Right.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. We went back to Memphis and recorded it, and we were all huge Jerry Lee fans. So
who isn't?
Who isn't? And so we got to go see Jerry Lee a few times, and it was really a great fun.
And you were in Blues Brothers 2000 too, right?
Yeah. That's right. I forgot about that one.
It's different than rock and roll. I mean, it's a lot of hanging around on movie sets, a lot of waiting.
Oh, it's totally different.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided that I had the best gig, being a guitar player.
Sure.
I didn't really want to be an actor, and that was one way to find out.
Any chance of getting back with the T-Birds?
I think it would be fun. we haven't really talked about it. So
It took 2 guitarists to replace you. Remember that.
well, but don't forget, on the T-Birds records, I would always overdub. So I would always play rhythm with myself.
You're being diplomatic. Okay.
Let's talk about my box set.
Let's talk about the back set.
So they just came out earlier last year, but it's just been out for not long. It's called The Jimmie Vaughan Story. There's 98 songs on there with a picture book. There's an LP and CDs and songs all the way back to before the T-Birds that I recorded, and then a lot of stuff. 98 cuts.
Wow.
Let me read some of the people that are on the songs are on with. Albert Collins, Art Neville, B.B. King, Bill Carter, Billy Gibbons, Bo Diddley, Bonnie Raitt, Buddy Guy, Charlie Musselwhite, Delbert McClinton, Denny Freeman, Doyle Bramhall, Dr. John, Eric Clapton, James Cotton, Jimmy Rogers, John Lee Hooker, Lazy Lester, Little Milton, Lou Ann Barton. Of course, it's got the Fabulous Thunderbirds and the Vaughan brothers and Stevie on there too.
Well, my grandmother used to say you can judge a man by the company he keeps. And you got a lot of legends there, and you are a legend, my friend. It's an honor to have spent some time with you.
All right. Thank you for the interview. I enjoyed it.
From his 1994 debut solo album, Strange Pleasure, that's Boom Papa Boom by the great Jimmie Vaughan, who I want to thank for being on the It's Only Rock and Roll podcast. Now, Jimmy wanted me to remind you all that the good people at Bear Family Records have released a limited 2-LP, 45 RPM white vinyl edition of Strange Pleasure, and it's been given the audiophile treatment by mastering legend Bob Ludwig, and we're talking 180 grams of analog goodness. Also available, The Jimmie Vaughan Story, a career retrospective box set consisting of 5 CDs, 1 LP, 2 7-inch singles. It's like over 6 hours of music from his days before, with, and after the T-Birds, including a slew of special guests like Bo Diddley, John Lee Hooker, James Cotton, Eric Clapton, and the list goes on and on. And both items can be ordered from the links available in the show notes. Now, don't forget, if you're enjoying these interviews, be sure to subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts. And please leave us 5 stars and a nice review. You'll be glad you did. Come back next time and join us on the next episode of the It's Only Rock and Roll podcast.